Welcome back to RGR, everybody. I'm Ryan. This is me going rogue. Make sure you like, sub, and hit the bell. We are kicking off a new series, and you might not recognize this face, but he's in the chat, and you have spoken to him. This is Jeff Porter, the guy in charge of the base research for Rogue Analytics and helps me out every single year. Jeff, how you doing, man?
Doing very good, Mr. Tracy. It is an honor and a privilege to be on here with you. I'm very excited.
Oh, you're the star. I'm just going to leave now, pal. You and Avery can take over the channel. We'll be okay. It'll work out just fine. It's funny because we've been doing this for a long time, and it's to the point where the raw volume of how many stats are available are difficult. And every year the Chiefs win, it makes things harder because we're later and later and later in the year. And so that's what you've really been able to bring to Rogue Analytics is crunching the numbers. And before we even get into how you do what you do to set us up for success so we know who fits the Chiefs, like, give everybody your background. Like, you deal with stats all the time.
Yeah, I have a natural attraction to stats regardless of the sport, whether it's NFL, college football, baseball, basketball. I'm kind of a math nerd, a techno geek, if you will. But I just enjoy the stats behind things, and if one team beats another, I just have this instant inclination of trying to figure out why, and so I dive into the stats and see what I can find.
If you guys happen to watch high school basketball in Western Kansas, you've probably heard Jeff's voice as well. So there's a lot that goes over into statistics and how we use them. So from your baseline, like, how do you view what goes into the organization of getting all the data together so that we can build the matrix and the draft guide off of it?
Yeah, I use websites and other stat sources that you indicate, and basically do some manual screen scrapes to get certain statistics for a player that you and Dan Harms have on the list, and I throw all that stuff into a spreadsheet, and then you take it from there and do your magic and compile human readable information on the players. And I get the impression, tell me if I'm wrong, that your eventual goal is to rank a player within that player's position group with the NFL prospects.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal. You give us all the production, and then we wait. We sit around and we wait for the combine and the pro days, and then we get all the athleticism metrics, right? And then what Dan and I do in the meantime is to crunch all this film of teams that I didn't watch live. And I try to watch college football live when I can, with the family time and all that kind of stuff. And so I generally have a read on Power 5 programs. I've seen guys make plays, right? But then we get into the actual film review. And there's a lot of people that do that. But we do that in a way that we try to get as many players as we can. We don't do a full 300 like or like Dane Brugler does, or even the guys at KCSN who do a great job. But we take what we think are going to be the top 150 guys that might be on the Chiefs board, and we break them down by film, and then we go back and we look at the production because they are tied together. And people will call us a little bit more analytical than analytics should be in some front offices, and that's true. But there are a lot of front offices that do exactly what we do on their own, and that's why we kind of emulate that. So that's the point of view that it comes from. And I think it's always really interesting because I always have my takes and my opinions, and they're all rattling around in here. But you get a good look. You might watch some college football, right? But you get a good look right all at once of all the stats and player comparisons. What's that like as a unique perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting from my point of view. I don't watch a lot of college football like you do. I may watch a Big 12 team since I live in Kansas. I might watch a Big 12 game, but otherwise I don't know a whole lot about the big publicized subjects like who's going to be in the college football playoff and who won the national championship, Michigan. I don't even know who was the Heisman Trophy winner this past year. But my thoughts and opinions about which NFL prospects look interesting are purely from a statistics point of view, the number of games the player played in his career, what school he played for, as schools now with the transfer portal, and the player's physical size are interesting to me.
That's one of the hardest parts, and I think it's only going to get worse as the portal is more and more and more of a thing. But in your research, and you do a lot of our research to get those stats, and now they have multiple schools and they have multiple stat lines, and you're trying to combine it all. What do you think of the process, and how difficult is that? Is it getting harder each year, in your opinion?
No, I don't think so. I think it's getting easier from my point of view each year to gather the statistics, and I enjoy, whatever catches my eye, taking a deep dive, seeing what I could figure out. And this particular class of NFL prospects, I did some investigating and just kind of looked at players that jumped out at me, and ended up grabbing a few players to focus on and talk with you about.
Oh, that's awesome. And folks, this is a series. You're going to see us a couple of times here as we go through the run up to the draft. And so we're going to talk about some of those players next week and the week after and how we get to that process. But for right now, knowing that we're doing this in kind of a systemic way, do you have a position group that you look at first? Like when I throw all that data at you, do you have somebody like that's where you like to go, number one?
Yeah, I mean, we can start with the players that it's hard to get, an idea of, and that's the offensive and defensive linemen. Not a lot of stats for them. They are obviously critical. Your edge rushers on defense, your tackles on offense. Those are positions that a pro team needs to focus on. Wide receivers seem to jump out at me, probably because if you're a Chiefs fan, a person wants to get some receivers from the draft, whether it's first round or multiple rounds. Defensive backs are important. I enjoy looking at linebackers because I think that they have a critical role on defense. Everything gets funneled to them. Man, I remember one year Chiefs had a linebacker that led the team with 100 and some tackles, and they let him go at the end of the season. It's tough. It's tough to see a linebacker go that leads your team in tackles. That's the way it works.
It is, and it is the defensive equivalent of running back in my mind because it's being de-emphasized across the league, but you still have to have it. The second level is where I always look first to how to build a defense. Maybe that's because that's what I grew up doing, right? And so my perspective is obviously what you grow up on is probably the easiest place to start. I generally have become more methodic in my old age so that I accomplish the things that I can do the fastest first, like quarterback stats. I don't need their combine that much. I'll tell you about his capability and who can run fast, although this year the quarterbacks don't seem to want to participate. So I've had them done for a while as a position group because it just comes down to film grades and production stats. So everybody else is about the same. But you've deep dived, and so we'll take your first position group, and I know that it's wide receiver. What stood out to you about the group? And then next week, folks, we're going to come back and talk about prospects in particular.
Right. So, at a high level, when you try to look at the best receivers available in this year's draft, I just decided to look down the list of stats and see what would be, kind of a cutting line. How do you really find the elitist receivers in the college game this past season, or even during their career, by statistics, purely by statistics. So I decided to start looking at things. And if you look at yards per catch for a career for these wide receivers, just kind of grab a number, 16 yards per catch for their career. On your list of players that you guys were interested in this year, there were 9 wide receivers that had 16 yards per catch or more. There were 7 receivers that had an average of 4.5 catches per game over their career. And then I thought, well, to get the really tip of the top, what about a receiver that does both of those things? 16 yards a catch for their career, 4.5 catches per game for their career. None of them, 0 receivers at both of those things.
That's the crazy part. And it's a two-edged sword, especially on the catches per game. And that's, look, not just in wide receivers. I do that for tackles with linebackers in a number. It's because how much use are you getting? In the offense, it's a selective use because the quarterback's got to make a decision. On the defensive side of the ball, it's are they attacking you or not? How many opportunities you get to make a play, right? It's interesting because that perspective of trying to put both those criteria together, which are two of our production ranks as part of a bigger conglomerate, folks, as we boil it all down in the algorithm, both those go in. But I haven't isolated those. Surprising to you that there's nobody that qualifies for both?
It was surprising, when you look at the pro numbers. Obviously, they played more games in a given season, right? But maybe there's a bit more of kind of an average of passing plays in the pros than there are in college. A lot of things come into it, as you all know. But these college teams, that maybe they have a great offensive line, and it gives the quarterback more time to get the ball to some of these receivers on certain teams. And maybe that team did not come up against an opponent that had good defensive backs. And maybe their pass rush wasn't the best. And so that allowed these receivers to catch more passes and do more on offense. But yeah, it's a very interesting thing. And I always enjoy diving in there and seeing what's there.
Well, I appreciate you doing it because it sets us up for what's coming next, folks. If you haven't been to Rogue APC yet, go over there. The Athletic Matrix is out. The draft guide is just about done by the time you see this. I'm burning away on building the book here. We got the content in. We're going to come back next week. We're going to tell you about the standouts, particularly at those two positions, and what Jeff's taken away that you haven't heard from me. And you're not going to hear from Dan because we're still in the film. When we get done with the top 150, we go back and we start digging deeper. And we will watch film right up until draft night, folks. So in the meantime, you get another perspective from what Jeff sees at the entry level of the stats. Don't have to take in the film and everything else. It's one pillar. And I see this as a triangle of a three-way evaluation that we do every year. So I'm really excited about it. So make sure that you like, sub, and hit the bell. We're going to come back and continue this series next week. Don't miss it. And we'll talk to you then.